federalism, what do we understand by the definition of federalism? Before we get started into the video, I would put a disclaimer right here. So in some of the books that CBSE is offering, some of the books are not updated. Since in 7th schedule, we have the 3 lists, that's the union list, state list and the concurrent list. So I'm going to quickly tell you what are the state contents, what are the subjects in number. So when I talk about union list, yes, as of now you have approximately 100 subjects. Originally there were 97 subjects. So in many textbooks you have the union list has 97 subjects. However, somewhere you might be reading that the number has gone up to 100. Whereas when I talk about the state list, the second list is the state list in the 7th schedule. Earlier it sort of had 66 items. Now at present it has, earlier they used to have 66. Now they have, the latest content is now they have 61 subjects. Whereas when I talk about the third list, that's concurrent list, on which laws can be made both by the center as well as by the state. Now the situation is that this sort of concurrent list earlier had only 47 subjects. Now the fresh list has 52 subjects. Why 52 subjects? Because 5 subjects were removed from the state list and put right into the concurrent list. So that is why the number of concurrent list has the subjects in concurrent list, they have gone up by 5, whereas the number of subjects in the state list have reduced by 5. Okay, so talking about federalism, federalism basically means the division of power at 2 levels. Again, India, yes, is a federalist country on the face of it, but we do not have exact division of power. In India, center is more powerful, and we've taken this concept of center being more powerful from none other than Canada, because Canada also has a federalist concept, but in that case again center becomes more powerful, like in case of India. So I would say that Indian government somewhere follows a pattern of governance that is known as quasi-federalism, or what you call as partial federalism. That yes, we have traits of federalism, but that's partial federalism. That is what is known as quasi-federalism. So guys, let's get started into the set of questions that we have and how we're going to attempt those questions. The very first question is, why does the exact balance of power between the center and the state government vary from one federation to another? Explain 2 examples. So they've been asking that, of course, there's a division of power when we talk about federation. There's central government, there's state government, but the pattern has not been quite uniform across all the nations of the world, even if they follow federalist tendencies. Why is it the case? So that is a question. Please read the question carefully. Don't be in a hurry to start with the answer. You're going to lose marks if you do that. Don't rush directly to the answer. Just try to concentrate on what the question is asking for. And second part they're looking for is that you have to give 2 examples. Now, so the 2 examples is how federation is being established is going to depend. So there, though the exact balance, you're going to give a good introduction that though the, I would say the exact balance of power between the central and the state government, yes, it varies from one federation to another because they have opted out for a different route in the coming together. It may be the holding together. So the federal concept that has been established varies from one nation to the another. So there are 2 basic divisions. The very first one is coming together of the federation, and the second one is holding together of the federation. I'm going to give you a good example. You can sustain your friendship if both of your, like you and your friend, they probably come together to make a good alliance, to have each other for long. But however, your friendship is not going to sustain for long if you are, forced to get along, or there is some situation under which you guys have been asked to, maybe you asked to work on a project and you guys are not on good terms. So of course that's going to be, yes, you're coming together, but there's some compulsion associated with it, by which how I can define is like you're holding together the federation. Coming means you're voluntarily coming together, you're ready to share the power. So when I talk about political sphere, the coming together of federation, I'm going to explain the two examples that they've asked for. So the main aim when I talk about coming together is like small federations or maybe small states or small provinces. They come together to form a very strong union. They pool their own sovereignty so that they can have, though they retain their identity, but they want to have a very strong defense system, a very strong union. So there are countries that have been following this coming together of federation. It is, the three examples of the countries is USA, Switzerland and Australia, where the federal parts have come together on their own to have a very strong union. But when I talk about holding together a federation, it's that type of federation in which, the power has been divided between the central and the state government. But this is generally done in the case where central government tends to act more powerful. You've divided, you have decentralized the power to ensure that, yes, we follow the federal concept. For example, but yes, the power division is not equal, and the states at times do not have or cannot retain their identity. For example, in India, none of the state has the right to cede away or join, because they never joined Indian unions. All the states did not join Indian Union at their free will. So similarly, I would say they don't have the power to cede away from Indian Union. So what happens when I talk about the example is Indian, Spanish and Belgium federations. These are some of the examples which you can quote when you talk about holding together of the federation. So you guys have clearly seen that, yes, I have talked about the examples, I have given the examples, I have explained the examples clearly in a defined pattern. I have not made a mixed veg out of it. I have clearly defined, and every point is very clear in the answer. So it's all about your presentation, how you're going to present the answer. So moving forward on to the next question on what type of principle is Indian Union based. So we've just discussed, the same question has been asked in a different format. So describe the threefold distribution of legislative powers between the union government and the state government. So of course they are talking about the threefold distribution that we just discussed towards the very beginning of the class, that yes, there is some division, there is some distribution of power, and that's none other than the union list, state list and the concurrent list. So we know, yes, Indian Union is based, see, I'll tell you. So when the Constitutional Assembly was being formed, or they were defining the Indian Constitution, so there was a lot of fight going on whether India should retain its name as India or it should be called as Bharat. The other point of dispute was, what are we going to call India? Is it going to be a federation of states, or what else do you suggest? So our forefathers, thought very smartly. They were intelligent people, and they probably knew the gravity of the situation. So in the Constitution, they've never used the word federation. They always state over and over again that India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. So that is what clearly is mentioned right here. So it is basically a federal system, yet it has some of the features that are there in a unitary system. For example, I told you, at times the central government becomes really strong. So this sort of system that has partial federalism attached to it or associated with it is known as quasi federal. So the power sharing is basically based on quasi-federal feature in which you have three lists: union list, state list, and the concurrent list. Union list, of course, is the very first important list that carries topics that are very important, to have a uniform policy. They are very important with respect to national importance, and every state has to follow the same guidelines when it comes to these union laws. So I've already made a disclaimer that in many books there are 97 subjects. However, now they've approximately reached 100 subjects. So in this case, the union list, the topics that are there, the subjects that are there, the exclusive power to make laws on those subjects is with the parliament. So you have to define the second point also, that these are the lists that need uniform policy. They are supposed to be implemented across the country, and you have to give examples also. For example, in this case, it's going to be defense, atomic energy, foreign affairs, railways, banking, posts, and telegraph. These are the most important topics when we talk about the union list. Now let's jump onto the state list. So the next list is the state list that has, in some books they've given 66 subjects, but I told you the state has the area, demarcated area, the territory on which they can make laws. So as of now, the number of subjects has been reduced to 61. The 5 subjects have been shifted to the concurrent list, which now has 52 subjects. So the state legislature, the legislative assembly, the legislative council, in case there is, they can make laws on the subjects mentioned in the state list. Now, just for your additional information, I would like to point out here that, let's say, if we talk about the concurrent list, so in concurrent list, it's the third fold of the list. So concurrent has those subjects which come on, for example, marriage is there, trade unions are there, then you have adoption, succession laws, because all these laws can be made by the state and the central government. So in case both the governments have made a law, so of course, like I told you, India is a quasi-federal government, follows the pattern of a quasi-federal government. So the law made by the central government is going to prevail. So being an Indian, you should also know that in case the state law has been made, the state has made a law on a subject of the concurrent list with the prior approval of the president. Only in that case, only in that scenario, it's gonna, supersede the law made by the parliament, unless and until parliament makes another law to supersede the law made by the state list. If you've not understood, I repeat it again for you. That's not given in your textbook. It's just for the additional knowledge. That suppose a topic has been made, the central government and the state government have made a law on a topic of interest. In this case, of course, in normal circumstances, the central law is going to prevail. But there's one exception. If the state government has already taken the permission from the president, then the state law is going to prevail in place of the central law. But that is going to prevail only till the time the parliament does not come up with a very fresh law that is going to supersede the law made by the state government. That means for some time, yes, state law is going to make its imprint, it's going to survive unless and until parliament comes up with a new law. So these are the answers to the question that we just looked for, that what type of principle is Indian Union based on? Threefold distribution of legislative means law-making power between union and the state government. So we've explicitly defined and covered the entire summary of the chapter right here. Now, so like I told you, on concurrent list, both union and the state government can make laws, and whole Indian federation or the federal system is an example of holding together. Yes, we've provided decentralization, but the more control is in the hands of the central government. Okay, jumping on to the next question, describe any 5 features of a federal government. See, I would say federal government means you have to give a very good introduction. Federal means division of power at 2 or more tiers or 2 or more levels between the government. So start with a good definition of federal government. Then tell that yes, you're going to explain the 5 features. So when you talk about the 5 features, the very first feature is please ensure that the features that you're going to mark have a separate phrase that's going to separate it from the content that you're going to write. For example, I'm talking about the first key feature, that there are 2 or more levels of government. Okay, you are going to explain that it's going to be state level, it's going to be at the provincial level, or maybe at the local level. Second important point of constitution is about the constitutional status, that there is constitutional recognition awarded to the national laws, to the, I would say, national government and the state government. They operate in their own territory, in their own area of operation of performance, and they have their performance areas is explicitly mentioned, clearly mentioned in the Constitution of India. So it's like their jurisdiction is with the respective level of the government. If it's related to Pan India, it's going to be the central government. If it's just related to the territory, it's going to be the state government. Then there's independence of judiciary. Just in case you want to interpret the constitution, just in case there's a dispute between different levels of the government, judiciary is going to come handy. It's going to solve the purpose. Then yes, these 2 government, in order to ensure that they support themselves, in order to ensure that they do really well in the economic field and don't ask for financial credit from each other, this is an important feature of financial autonomy is given in case of a federal government. And then last important point is there is a clear distribution of power. Though you cannot amend the constitution at times that easily, but however, their own jurisdiction, their own area of operation is clearly demarcated, that which subjects can they legislate on, what is their jurisdiction, what is their a reference point that they can refer or ask, make laws on. So that has been made pretty clear when we talk about the federal form of government. So we've talked about it. Let's revise once again. The very first one is 2 or more levels of government. Then there's constitutional status. Then we've talked about the independence of judiciary, financial autonomy, and finally distribution of powers. Now, why I am stressing on the point that guys, you need to remember the key phrases is, if you remember those key phrases, it's gonna help you frame the answer even if you don't know the entire context. So please, in social studies, try to memorize the key pointers or the key phrases for that matter. Next is explain any 4 features of federalism. Like we've just explained 5 features of federal government. Similarly, they've asked 4 features of federalism. Same points you're going to give in this case also, but in federalism, you can say that courts have the power to interpret the constitution. That is the additional point you guys can mention, that fundamental provisions are also there in the constitution that cannot be changed, unilaterally. It's like the central and the state government have to, agree on this, that okay, now we're going to amend the constitution, take some laws in, or bring in some changes that are acceptable to both the government. So yes, more or less, it's going to be on the same line that we just discussed. Moving on to the next question, distinguish between coming together and holding together type of federation. So you have to distinguish. Though we've discussed this question, now I wanted to bring to your notice, guys, when they're asking you to differentiate, to distinguish, try to put your points across in the form of difference chart. For example, coming together of federation, if I talk about, you're supposed to give examples in both the cases. Then you're going to talk that yes, it involves independence of states, whereas here the states may not be independence, or autonomy might not be given to the state. Similarly, there in this case, the units try to increase their security, whereas in this case, there is, I would say, absence of pooling their sovereignty, because they're not coming together. It's like they've been forced to come together. For example, in this case, you know, after India got independence, the princely states were brought under the Indian Union under the efforts of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who's known as the Iron Man of India. The states were not willing to come together, whereas in this case, when I talk about USA or countries like that, may it be the central government, may it be the state government, they have sort of equal powers and they are equally strong. May it be the central, may it be the state government. So you can differentiate it. This is a sufficient answer when this question has been asked for a 5-mark question. You can add 2 to 3 more, 1 more point at least, and then you're done. If it's for a 3-mark, yes, you can write, you can skip a point. However, if the question is asked for 5-mark, please ensure that you write all the relevant points accordingly. Okay, so, and before you jump on to answer like that, please ensure that you give a good introduction that's going to fetch you more marks by giving the definition of federation, or what do you understand by federal form of government. So give an introduction to it and then kickstart with a difference chart. Putting the heading across, don't forget to mention that yes, here you're going to talk about coming together and here you're going to talk about holding together of federation. Okay, so let's jump on to the next question in this case. The creation of linguistic states, that means states formed on the basis of language, was the first and major test for democratic politics in our country. You have to justify the statement. Yes, language of course plays a very important role, and we need to safeguard the languages, every language, every culture, every minority. So following this belief, we've accepted that there are 22 scheduled languages given in 8th schedule of India. It's like Hindi inclusive of 21 other languages that are recognized as scheduled languages for the constitution. Now they've asked, I'm going to go back to the question. So you've talked about scheduled languages. They've asked that yes, there has been creation of linguistic states. It was the first and the major test for democratic politics, like, segregating the states yet retaining the identity. So listen, our country, the main feature when it comes to India's language policy is each state might have its own official language, but our constitution has not provided the status of, please guys understand this, it's very important. Our constitution has not provided for the status of any national language, yet we have official language status that's given to Hindi. Official language is of course Hindi, and we were supposed to discontinue the use of English 15 years after the commencement of the constitution, like from 1950. They decided that they won't be using English from 1950 after 1965. But however, we did not discontinue the use of English language even after 15 years. We still use English as the official language. Second important point that you can give, next important point is that besides Hindi, we have, like we've mentioned in the introduction, we have scheduled language. The constitution provides the use of Hindi and English for official purpose, like I just told you. And most of the, the government works, like I told you, is going to take place in the concerned language of that particular state. So it's never though the government has made a lot of effort for the promotion of Hindi as the official language, but that does not mean that in every non-Hindi speaking states, especially when it comes to South India, we've been forcing them to speak in Hindi, or we've been promoting the practice that, of course, Hindi is the national language, you're supposed to respect that. Nothing of that sort has been done. Though the states have been divided on linguistic lines, but the framing of this policy, the language policy, yet tested India's spirit of federalism once again. It sort of brought to picture that we respect other nations, we respect our citizens, the minority section, and we straight away said that, you know, and like it inspires the confidence in different language speaking people that no language will be imposed on them, because we've never imposed even Hindi as the national language. So in a way, language policy has strengthened the unity and integrity, because it's like each one to its own. It's like we've declared an official language, yet we're not forcing you to use yours, this language. You are allowed to use your own language, and you can function in your own state in your own particular language. But here again, I would like you to notice the fact that all the, you know, if you want to place a petition in the judiciary, it's going to be in English language. However, if you guys are going to in the judiciary basically follows a line of pattern. It follows for its jurisdiction, for its announcement of punishment and all. It's always and always English. So the official language for judiciary is English. However, the national language, there's no status given to national language. It's just the official language, that is Hindi and English. Okay. So next important is explain 5 changes towards decentralization brought in the constitution after amendments made in 1992. So let me explain this point. So the basically 11th schedule was added by 73rd Amendment Act in the year 1992 that talks about rural governance. Similarly, 12th schedule was also added by 74th Amendment Act in the year 1992. So they've asked you to give 5 changes that now towards decentralization brought under the constitution under the amendment made in the year 1992. So in 1992, we have 2 sets of amendments, one talking about rural governance and the other one talking about the urban governance. So what is there? The set of constitution number 1 is that earlier it was not imposed that you are supposed to conduct regular elections. Now they have been forced. Constitutional mandatory compulsion has been made on the state. Now they have been forced to, conduct regular elections to local bodies, and this election process is being conducted not by the National or Election Commission, but by the State Election Commission. So this is the case. Regular elections are going to be conducted. Then they have to ensure that the seats are reserved for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. 1/3 reservation is given to the women, and an independent commission, like I said right here, State Election Commission is going to make sure that the local elections are conducted on regular interval of time. And yes, the last important constitutional point related to this amendment is that the state governments were required to share their power and revenue also with the local government. It was now made a compulsion, which earlier was generally followed as a practice at the whims and fancies of the state government. Now with this amendment, they've made it compulsory for the state government to hold the elections and ensure that the revenue, the resources and the taxes are actually shared with the local government also. So these are the 5 important points that has brought a big change, I would say, in the grassroots governance structure of the country. So, okay, the last question is, point out one feature in the practice of federalism in India that is similar to, and one feature that is different from that of Belgium. Now, let me see how many of you can, try out this question. So, one feature, please ensure that you segregate these two sections. One feature is supposed to be in favor and the other one is going to be against. Okay, so the point in favor is that, Belgian federalism and in Indian federalism, the constitutional demarcation has been made quite clear between the regional and the local government. And the different feature is that unlike the Belgian federalism, the Indian federalism, the regional and the local governments, they are dependent on the central government for finances, and when they have to look out for other matters, they have their dependence. Whereas in Belgium, may it be at the regional level, may it be at the community level, the powers were given to them. They were asked to work independently. But the other contradictory point right here is that at time for the finances, they have to look up either to the state government or maybe towards the central government. Okay guys, so that is the difference and the similar point. Next question is, what is the main difference between a federal form of government and a unitary form? I know this is a very, very basic and very easy question. Let's try it out and see if you guys can answer out of what you've understood over the time in this class. So you have to explain this with an example. So I have seen that they've talked about difference. So I've drawn this chart. Federal, guys, the power is divided at two levels. In unitary, there's no two level of government. It's just one level. It's just a unitary style that they follow. In the functioning, when I talk about that, yes, each domain, each territory, may it be the central, may it be the state government, they have the power to legislate on the topics that they are provided with. Whereas in unitary system, since we don't have the state government, so they don't have any topics of their own. In this case, of course, the central government cannot, because the federal form of government is there. The central government cannot always order to the state government to do something. In this case, because we have a unified system, a centralized system, so of course, the central government, whenever it feels like, they can pass on orders to the local government that you're supposed to act in this particular manner and in that particular manner. In many countries, the citizenship clause is that you are the nation of, or you are the citizen of that particular province, and also you are the citizen of the country as a whole. Whereas in a unitary concept, you are just given single citizenship. That means you are just the citizen of that country. Now, why I explain this answer is that I want to highlight, first talk about the nature, then what are the functions that you've mentioned, and then you're going to talk about the scope and significance, which most of us tend to forget. And towards the end, of course, one thing that I have not added here is again gonna be the example. So I've written the example here, it's USA, and in unitary concept also you're supposed to give a good answer when you talk about the unitary concept, where the division of power does not take place at two levels. But if I talk about India would not come under the unitary form of government, because yes, there is clear demarcation of government at two levels. Okay guys, so next is state any two differences between the local government before and after the constitutional amendment. We just discussed that before 1992 amendment, to hold regular elections were not a compulsion, it was not mandatory. However, now it has been made mandatory. And also we discussed the reservation was not compulsory, but after the coming of this act, they must ensure that the seats are reserved for women and for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. These are the two basic differences that have come after the constitutional amendment of 1992. So on that note, I'm going to wrap up the session for today. The PDF link for this file, for these notes, are provided in the application. So in order to download the app, you guys can check the description box. There's a link provided there. You can download the app, you can get the PDF from there. In addition to that, you can watch the other videos, get access to the other videos, the other relevant content is available there, study material is also available there, and also you can ask your doubts which will be resolved right there and then. So until we meet next, I want to thank you guys for attending this session. I hope to see you in the next session. Till then, take care, stay healthy and stay hydrated. Bye guys, thank you so much.